Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Actually, I came to listen to the scheduled speakers, but somehow they put me up here as well. It's not so often that I come to, I like to say Bombay rather than Mumbai. But when I come here, I like to remember that Bombay was Srila Prabhupada's office, as we will be very much reminded by a book that will be coming out soon, I believe in January, from His Holiness Lokanath Swami. Some months ago, actually more than a year ago, we were the previous year we were celebrating 50 years of ISKCON. And as part of this celebration, in April of 2016, we had a conference at Harvard University. And this was a conference to reflect on the accomplishments of our society, to consider past, present, and future of the society. Eventually, the presentations, the essays, the presentations that were presented there will be published, hopefully sooner rather than later. In my own presentation, I reflected on what in modern parlance is called life writing. This is the sort of broad term which includes biography, autobiography, journaling, Facebook. It's all different forms of life writing. We've all been so fortunate to have the recordings, the memories of so many devotees, of their experiences with Srila Prabhupada. And I haven't gotten a chance to look closely, but I believe this is Mother Vishakha's book, yes. I have read the book before it was published. I was fortunate to read the book before it was published. And the point I want to make is there's something interesting happening in our society as the Krishna Consciousness movement, as ISKCON continues after Srila Prabhupada, and that is the demonstration that Srila Prabhupada's legacy is alive and thriving. And one way this is demonstrated is through very engaging writing by followers of Srila Prabhupada. Now, so far, all of these works are still very much focused on Srila Prabhupada, as is right, as it should be. But there is something of a shift from the initial books, which are biographies of Srila Prabhupada. The shift is now turned to reflect on what does it mean to be a follower of Srila Prabhupada. And this is what I find especially interesting and especially engaging in these amazing works, including especially that of Mother Vishaka. I want to take this opportunity to recommend to all of you to read this amazing book. Hare Krishna. And if I may just continue on this line, what I especially appreciate is that she tells so much about her own struggles in the course of developing of her Krishna consciousness. The doubts that come. Sometimes in spiritual life, we may think doubts are such a terrible thing. I won't tell anyone about it, that I am doubting. But what if you, instead of doing that, let it be what it is, and thus confront the doubt, the difficulty, the challenges in your spiritual life. And I think this is what Mother Vishaka has shown so well that it's possible to do in her book. My own experience, my own meetings with Srila Prabhupada were very minimal. I was in Europe. I first met Srila Prabhupada in 1972, and hardly had I met him in Paris when devotees, actually before I met Srila Prabhupada, a few days before I met, we were going to Paris to meet Srila Prabhupada from Germany. And the devotees, the senior devotees of the German yatra asked me, "Would you like to be initiated?" I had only joined the devotees about 10 days before that. And I was still trying to figure out how to put on a dhoti and such like that. But when they asked me, "Would you like to be initiated?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" And so the moment I saw Srila Prabhupada, the first time, which was at the airport in Paris, as he came through immigration, he waved. I still have the little black and white photo of that moment. The moment I saw him, I thought, yes, that's him. That's my guru. I've been searching for him. I had that sense. So then we all threw ourselves making Dandavat Pranams as Srila Prabhupada walked by. And it was my good fortune that he brushed with his lotus foot my thumb. Hare Krishna. So, anyway, like that, Srila Prabhupada would come to Europe once a year in the summertime. And so I met him for a few days 1972, 73, 74, 75. And then 76 he also came, but I was requested to stay back and do Pujari service. Last time I met him was 1977 in London on that final trip that Srila Prabhupada made to London in September, to everyone's surprise. And I'll just add, I might say some things about each of these meetings, but I do want to hear from the others. I want to, though, also say that some years ago, I became inspired by the biography of Srila Prabhupada from His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami, and based on Srila Prabhupada's description, on Satsvarup Maharaj's description of what I call the Bombay affair, the whole story of the acquisition of this property, I wrote a drama. It's a 10-act drama, and the actors, the characters in the drama, first of all, are Srila Prabhupada, there's Brahmananda Prabhu, there's Tamal Krishna Goswami, there's Mother Yamuna, there's Palika Mataji, and Shyamasundar, like that. The idea was to try to do what in the classical Sanskrit tradition is done, is to focus on one rasa. And here the rasa, we could say, is vira rasa, heroism, Srila Prabhupada's determination. And I'm sure everyone will be hearing very, very much about that story when you have your festival next month. But it was a great inspiration for me to write this drama, and perhaps someday some devotees here could perform it. In any case, I'm happy to be here in Bombay. I'll never get used to Mumbai. Bombay, Srila Prabhupada's office. And I must say, I'm as you say in Indian English, I am too much impressed at how alive this temple is, how thriving it is, and I can only imagine how pleased Srila Prabhupada must be. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki Hare.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschatire Sadharini Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I was all day remembering pastimes with Srila Prabhupada that I participated here in, I'm also going to say Bombay, somehow it just, like Maharaj, my tongue just doesn't want to say Mumbai. Because that's what it was when we got here. So, because in 1974 was the first really well-organized Mayapur festival. We rented, from America, we rented we didn't rent, but we bought all the tickets on a 747, almost 90% of the tickets were all devotees. We picked up more in England, we picked up more in Paris, and we were having kirtans at 30,000 feet. We were dancing up, and the whole plane was devotees. We were dancing up and down the aisles. You know, the poor pilot, he couldn't figure out, there's no turbulence on his weather radar. But he's experiencing turbulence. Finally, he had to tell us to sit down. So anyway, back in 1974, there was none of this bottled water or all the different facilities that we have now. And somehow our stomachs couldn't adjust to buffalo ghee. And we were very sick. But at the end, after Mayapur, we came to the Vrindavan festival, and then we were going back. But just at that time, the festival was ending. The police commissioner here in Bombay had stated in the newspapers that our Sankirtan on our property was a public nuisance. We couldn't imagine such a thing in India, that Sankirtan could be a public nuisance. And the municipality was refusing to give permission to build the temple. So Prabhupada wanted to have a Sankirtan protest and take advantage of, especially us dancing white elephants. So there in the airport, my belly was sick as anything. And in those days, we didn't just fly from Delhi to London. We went from Delhi to Beirut, Beirut to Athens, Athens to Rome, Rome to Paris, Paris to London, then London to New York. 1974, that was the flight. I wasn't looking forward to that flight. And when my wonderful godbrother Vishnu Janmashtami came down the line, all the devotees were lined up to get on the plane, and he was saying Prabhupada wants some devotees to come to Bombay for Sankirtan protests, and since I love Sankirtan, especially Harinam, and I didn't want to sit on that plane the way my stomach was feeling. So somehow a whole bunch of us got drafted to come here to Bombay. And they got us a train. I don't know if there was other trains, but the train we were on had no cushions on the seat. It was just hard wood, and it was a 34-hour train ride. Anyway, we got here. That time there was just, right in the corner over here, there was just a little tiny temple with a little, tin shed, darshan mandap. It was just a tiny little place. Radha Ras Bihari were staying there. So here, this was all empty land, so they erected a huge pandal. So Prabhupada was doing this nice pandal every night. Of course, we couldn't understand anything, but it was wonderful to watch Prabhupada because he was speaking mainly in Hindi. And the thing that most fascinated me, after the program, they would bring this big plate of Mahaprasad. And Prabhupada would sit there with the most curious look on his face, just so, how to describe it, just so amused. He would sit there, everybody would come, and Prabhupada would put the little Mahaprasad in. He just had this sweet little amused smile on his face. Were you ever here for that? You weren't here. Yeah. He was just, I just used to stand right beside the Vyasasan, watching Prabhupada with this sweet little smile, taking some Mahaprasad and putting it in everybody's hand. Everyone came with their hand, and Prabhupada was giving. I can still see Prabhupada's smile in my mind. So then we got the opportunity to go on some morning walks with Srila Prabhupada here on the Juhu beach. And of course, our famous Dr. Patel used to come along to argue. And I can remember one of the walks I was on, Prabhupada was arguing against his Mayavad philosophy, philosophical arguments. He was saying, just like, here is the land, here is the sea, there is the air. Now you may say it is all atoms, it is all one, it is all atoms. Still, it may be all atoms, but we're walking on the land, not on the sea, nor on the air. It's all right, it is all atoms. It is all one. It is all atoms. But still, we walk on those atoms that are land, not on the sea or the air. He kept repeating this point over and over to Dr. Patel. He said, just like this body, whole thing is body. But this is a head, this is a mouth, this is an eye, this is a belly, this is a hand, this is leg. It's all right, whole thing is body, but we don't show our hand and say this is body. We say this is hand. Whole thing is body. He said even child can understand. He said even child can understand. Then he looked at Dr. Patel, he said, therefore you're less intelligent than a child. And Prabhupada walked a little further. He said, just like in this body, so many holes are there. You can say it is all holes. Every hole is a hole, it is all one. Still, we put the food here, not here. Prabhupada went like that. Again he repeated. He said, you can say it is all holes, it is all one, but still we put the food here, not here. So these are some of my wonderful memories of Srila Prabhupada here in Bombay. I wish I could remember more of those morning walks, or some of though that one is really stuck in my mind. But sometimes people ask me, when was the first time that I met Prabhupada? And that was because I joined in a place called Boulder, Colorado, and there was temples on the East Coast, there was temples on the West Coast. This was a little way inside the United States, in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. So they sent me to LA to get trained up. No, they get first to get trained up, then later they sent me to LA to get initiated. And that time we weren't on La Cienega, we were on, weren't on Watseka, we were on La Cienega Boulevard, old church. We didn't have place for Prabhupada to stay, so Prabhupada used to come in the morning. I remember Mother Rukmini from there. Every morning she would announce that it's another great day for Krishna Consciousness. Because we only had little tiny Radha Krishna deities, she was taking care of them. And so there wasn't any place for Prabhupada to stay. So he used to come in the morning for Darshanarti, then he would give class. After class he would have kirtan. We don't do that anymore, but after Bhagavatam class, Prabhupada always had kirtan for a few minutes. And then he would go back to his house. So, and he wouldn't come again till the next morning. So we drove out from Boulder, Colorado. We arrived just after noontime. So we were going to see Prabhupada till the next day. But it was Saturday night. So on Saturday night, we always used to go to Hollywood Boulevard. Now you all know Hollywood. So we used to go to Hollywood Boulevard. And there was one restaurant named Diamond Jim's. Did you ever chant in front of Diamond Jim's? And the sidewalk was very wide there. There was a big gap. The building was indented in like this, so we could push people into that indent, that little bay area, and the sidewalks remained clear. The police were happy, we were happy, only Diamond Jim's was not happy. So we would be up against the street with Vishnu Jan Swami, of course he was Brahmachari then leading, and he led. Prabhupada said he will chant his way back to Golok. His kirtans were so ecstatic. And he played the mridanga and he danced. And he would be dancing on his toes. It looked like he was floating, wasn't it? It always looked like he was floating. And he'd have us in this half circle like this, with our backs to the street. He said, just like the eye of Krishna. And we had our Hollywood raga. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You remember that melody? And Vishnu Jan would play very rapidly. He said, we don't want to leave any gaps for Maya to enter. So we were chanting like that. And Vishnu Jan, he's standing looking down the line. So he can see the street, he can see the sidewalk both. All of a sudden his eyes got very big and he said, Prabhupada, and he hit the sidewalk. Now we didn't see anything in front of us that would make him do like that, so we figured something happened behind us. We all turned around, and there was Prabhupada. Now you'll understand how old we are. Prabhupada was in a Ford Admiral. You probably never even heard of a Ford Admiral. But Prabhupada was in a Ford Admiral. He was in the window, and the pure devotee was paying obeisances to us. He was going like this, making pranams to us. We felt totally embarrassed. We wanted to pull up the sidewalk and crawl underneath, you know. And so then we all hit the sidewalk. It just so happened, I told this story in Vrindavan, and Gargamuni told me that actually that particular night, he said, I remember that night, Prabhupada said, I want to go see how the devotees are pushing on Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement in this horrible place called Hollywood. And Prabhupada was so grateful to the devotees that we were spreading the Sankirtan movement, that Prabhupada, the pure devotee, was making pranams to people like us. And you don't want to know what our previous lives were like. So that was the first time that I saw Prabhupada, seeing how he was so grateful and so obliged to the devotees. So I'll tell one last story that's a very important story for all of you, because you're thinking, oh, you guys were very fortunate, you saw Prabhupada, we didn't get to see Prabhupada. But actually you're more fortunate than us. One time, and this story you won't find in any of the memory tapes because the devotee is no longer in this world. We had a wonderful godbrother named Kartikeya Maharaj. At some point he was Prabhupada's servant. Then they were in Hawaii. And they brought some wheat germ. I've never met anybody in India that knows what wheat germ is. But anyway, the point is it's not suji. It's also made from the wheat, but it's not suji. And he thought next time Prabhupada asks for halava, I'll make it with the wheat germ instead of with the suji. And Swamiji, that time was old days, he says, Swamiji will be so pleased. So one day Prabhupada asked for halava. So immediately Kartikeya went in the kitchen, he was cooking. Swamiji is going to be so pleased, I'm making it with this wheat germ, it's so healthy, he's really going to like it, he's going to be so happy. He offered to the deities, he brought it into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada took one look, he said, what is this? Halava means suji. With his left hand, Prabhupada said, take it out. Take it out. So Kartikeya was a very emotional type, a very sensitive type of person. So his whole meditation was that Swamiji will be so pleased. And Prabhupada just said, take it out with his left hand. Take it out. So he went in the temple room, he sat in front of the picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he said, I was just trying to please your your spiritual son, Swamiji, but somehow he's upset with me, I don't know what to do, and he was crying. So he was praying to Bhaktisiddhanta. Suddenly he heard this voice, Kartikeya? Kartikeya? He ran to Prabhupada's room. He said, bring that halava. And with great gusto, Prabhupada ate that halava. He said, bring some more. Again he ate. He finished off the whole pot of halava. So he learned two things. One is that Prabhupada is not alone, because he was praying to whom? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. There's a whole line of spiritual masters behind Prabhupada going back to Krishna's lotus feet. Second thing was, grandfather is more merciful than the father. So you're actually more fortunate than us. You have Prabhupada as your grandfather's spiritual master. You will get more mercy than us. So don't think yourself unfortunate. You're more fortunate than us. Hare Krishna.
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne. Vanchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhayavacha patitanam pavanebhyo Shri Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Jai. This program is supposed to go until 8 o'clock? No, 9 o'clock, okay. So these Maharaj and Dinabandhu Prabhu reminding me of some stories. Maharaj was talking about this conference at Harvard in last year in 2016, and he reminded me of a beautiful story. Is there an echo? It's okay? So there's a beautiful story I want to tell you from that Harvard conference. Of course, this is after Prabhupada's disappearance. It was just last year. But something very beautiful happened there. We have in Washington, D.C. a Vaishnav Christian dialogue. We have one coming up at the end of this month at ISKCON Tirupati, also a Vaishnav Christian dialogue. And there's some sannyasis. Maharaj will also be there. And nice devotees. But in Washington, we also have a Vaishnav Muslim dialogue. You might be surprised to know. So one of the members of that dialogue was a very young student at Harvard in 1967, I believe it was, when Prabhupada spoke at Harvard. And he was from India, a young Muslim student at Harvard. He was a brilliant person studying chemistry, and later he became an imam. But anyway, he tells the story. So let me see, how should I tell it? So the room where we were having the first part of this Harvard conference was the room where he first saw Srila Prabhupada. So he was telling all of us, okay, this wall was not here, and this was this, and this was here. He was remembering exactly how it was when Prabhupada spoke there. So he said that he was in a very disturbed state, going to meet a very high-pressure professor of his in a very technical subject. He was working on his PhD. And he was just walking through the hall, and he saw a sign for Prabhupada's talk. And he looked inside the room, and there was someone sitting in a lotus position on top of a table, wearing a saffron outfit. And he was completely shocked. And he said, "No one sits like that in America." And he was just completely spellbound. He was standing in the doorway. He was really rushing to a meeting with his professor, but he couldn't move. He was just being held spellbound by Srila Prabhupada, standing in the door and hearing Prabhupada speak about so many things. And he said at that moment he was convinced that there is spiritual truth outside of Islam. He was so moved by Srila Prabhupada. And so, 49 years later, he's at this conference and he's telling the story, and he wrote a poem for Srila Prabhupada. He's actually from Lucknow. Lucknow's in India, not Pakistan, right? Yeah. So he's from Lucknow. So Bengali is not his native tongue, but in honor of Srila Prabhupada, he wrote a poem in Bengali for Prabhupada. And it was so beautiful. I don't know if you remember this, Maharaj. Do you remember? Maybe. Anyway, so a very short poem, almost like a haiku. But he said, because a doorway is what's described as a liminal space. You're not in and you're not out, right? You're like Nrsimhadev appeared in the in-between space. So his poem said something like, "I was standing in the doorway," and he said, "and you gave me a flower which is still blooming." So beautiful, huh? You gave me a flower which is still blooming. And he actually told us that he's a Muslim, and you'd think that when he has difficulties in his life that he would think of something from the Quran. But he said he doesn't. He thinks of Prabhupada. So this is the impression that Prabhupada made on just a young Muslim student who was rushing down the hall. This is the character of Srila Prabhupada. So Maharaj reminded me of that, and then someone mentioned Pandal. Pandal. So I was once at a Pandal in Delhi, and there was a little room off the side of the stage where Prabhupada would sit and speak a little bit with important guests before going up on the stage. So I was given the service to sit there and just those people and got to hear from Srila Prabhupada. This must have been in 1973. I'm sure 72 or 73. And so there was a man who was wearing white, and when I saw him come in, I thought, I'm an American and I don't know anything about Indian culture, but when this man came in, I thought, oh, he just looks like such a pious, deeply religious person, and I was thinking this man is such a holy person. And so he came and he was sitting with Srila Prabhupada, and he said to Prabhupada, "Oh, Swamiji, give us your mercy. Give us your mercy," like that. And I was really shocked because my impression is that he was so holy, but as Vishaka Prabhu was saying the other day, Prabhupada was so intuitive. He would see the mentality of the person through the question. He would see, he would read the essence of the person's mentality. Like Krishna is called Bhavagrahi Janardana, right? He takes the essence of the devotee's offering. So Prabhupada was like that. So this man saying, "Swamiji, give us your mercy. Give us your mercy." And Prabhupada was completely dismissive of this man. And Prabhupada said, "I have already given everything, but still you do not take." It's like completely dismissing him. And I was really shocked. And then Prabhupada said, "It is just like a man who has fallen down a well, and he is crying, 'Give me a rope, give me a rope,' but he will not take." So that's a nice Pandal story. And that Pandal, Prabhupada was not happy at the location that previously they had a much better location at was LIC grounds in Mumbai, or is that Delhi? Delhi, yeah. They had a better location at the LIC grounds, and Prabhupada had wanted that location, but the temple president wasn't able to acquire that location. So I remember a group of devotees sitting in, at that time the Delhi temple was a rented house in an area of Delhi called Chanakyapuri, which was a sort of an enclave of a lot of diplomats and were living in that area. So it was a very nice house, but sort of isolated. So the temple president at that time, his name was Tejas, and Prabhupada was talking about the Pandal with great disappointment, and he was saying, "Tejas has gotten us a location which we will have to cross, people will have to cross the 7 oceans and 7 seas to get there." and then, perhaps thinking of the 7 oceans, 7 seas, he started quoting from the Sikshastakam prayers and different prayers. And then he started to quote from one later verse of the Sikshastakam prayers. He was saying, "Nayanam Galada Shudaraya." But then he stopped and he was saying again, "Nayanam Galada Shudaraya," as though he was forgetting the verse. And in the room was Brahmananda Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, his Sanskrit editor, Pradumna, all these big shots, right? And so I was sitting in the corner at the back, and so Prabhupada just kept sort of half chanting this verse, "Nayanam Galada Shudaraya." And so really quietly I said, Nayanam Galadash, you know, and then I was chanting the rest of the verse. And Prabhupada said, he said, you see this little girl, she knows the verse, you do not know. He was teasing them, you know, and then he tried it again with another verse. You know, I think it was Yugayitam Nimishena. And then I knew that verse also, and they didn't know, and he was saying, this little girl, she knows, you don't know. And so then I became very puffed up, thinking I knew these verses. So it was time for him to smash me. And then he began speaking about the Ugra Karma civilization, and he was talking about how they create these gigantic crucibles and I just went, And he looked at me with big eyes and he said, oh, you know what is crucible? And I didn't, and I should have admitted that I didn't. But I was thinking of like a cubicle where a monk meditates in a cubicle. I said, it's like one of those little rooms where a monk does his meditation. And Prabhupada just tossed his head. He had that wonderful gesture where he would be so dismissive of our foolishness. And so he just tossed his head and he said, does anyone know what is crucible? And then Brahmananda said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, a crucible is a gigantic form in which they mold steel for building gigantic girders on skyscraper buildings. And Prabhupada looked at me and said, yes, that is crucible. So that was a nice story. Morning walks. Well, I did want to tell, actually, some of you were here the other night. We had a gathering of ladies, but then there was another gathering. Can you raise your hand if you were here at that other gathering? Okay, so not many of you. So my very most favorite story of Srila Prabhupada, I want to share with you. I shared the other night. This, I think, is, as Dinabandhu Prabhu said, an important story for all of us, for all of you, for me, for all of us. This is my most favorite story currently of Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada was in New Vrindavan, West Virginia, country ashram, and the devotees, the temple was a little bit away, and they had gotten Prabhupada a house to stay in, a rented house, and there was an attached garage. And there was a devotee, he was a brand new devotee, and just to show you the caliber of us all at that time, he was just a very young man. He had lost his shoes. He had lost his driver's license. He was lost. And they gave him the service of guarding Srila Prabhupada's house at night. So he was more or less the chokidar, right? And so Prabhupada was upstairs, and the light was on in the room, and he was hearing Prabhupada speaking from his books. And he thought, oh, Prabhupada is reading his books. But then he realized he was hearing that clicking of the dictaphone on and off. He realized Prabhupada was translating his books. So he was so mesmerized listening to the sound of Prabhupada translating. And then it began to rain a little bit. And so he went into the garage to do his guarding service from inside the garage. And when he was inside the garage, all of a sudden he felt a presence behind him. And he turned around, and it was Srila Prabhupada standing right behind him. And he offered obeisances to Srila Prabhupada down on the ground. And then he got up and he said, Srila Prabhupada, is there any service I can do for you? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, you can go where I will not go. Go where I will not go. And he was so shocked because Prabhupada had just come from Caracas, Venezuela, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Chicago. And he was on his way to New York, London, Paris, Germany, and India. So he was bewildered. And he said, but Srila Prabhupada, where is it that you won't go? And Prabhupada said, this is so amazing. Please remember this. Sometimes these stories can just change the course of your life, right? So Prabhupada said, where is it you will not go, Srila Prabhupada? And Srila Prabhupada said, to the future. To the future. And by the way you treat the people there, they will know how much Krishna loves them. By the way you treat the people there, they will know how much Krishna loves them. Isn't that a wonderful story? Yeah, so thank you.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvase Sasunyavadi Paskya Tadeshatane Vanchakopa Tarubhischa Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. It's so enlivening to see so many, not only so many people, but so many bright, alert faces. It's very stimulating to see that. So I had the good fortune of meeting Srila Prabhupada in the Akash Ganga building, which is right in Bombay, on Marine Drive. And at that time I had no interest in spiritual life at all. But I was very impressed by Prabhupada's gentlemanliness and his respectful dealings and his alertness. I had never met anyone who was so aware of his surroundings. That was very striking. So I became intrigued. I was with my then boyfriend, now husband, Adivara Prabhu, and we became attached to the devotees. Time went on. And then, as we know, Prabhupada was very keen about this property, Hare Krishna land, and he arranged with Mr. Nair to put a down payment on. And then he decided it was time to leave Akash Ganga for the devotees and the Lord, Sri Sri Radha Rasa Bihari, and to come here to Hare Krishna land. So here at that time, as you may know, the front property where we are, well, at least where the temple is, was just overgrown. The locals used it as a dump. And the back part of the property had tenement buildings with a space in the center of the tenement buildings. And it was very rough for the devotees at that time, very primitive conditions for the devotees, and very little facility for the Lord. But Prabhupada was determined that we should be here to make our presence felt here. So at that time, the temple president was Madhuvisa Swami, and he and everyone else surrendered to Prabhupada's desire. So Madhuvisa Swami got 2 taxis. At that time in India, all the cars were black ambassadors. All of you seem to be young, or at least almost all of you are young. You may not remember or know. They were all black ambassadors. Every car looked like every other car, except the taxis may have had a little yellow on them. But anyway, he got 2, and 3 devotees sat in the back seat of each taxi, and he laid Radharani across the laps. Our Radharani, who we worship here, were laying across the laps of 3 devotees, and in the other taxi was Rasa Bihariji. And that is how Radha Rasa Bihari came from Akash Ganga to Hare Krishna land, back of the ambassador taxi. It's called Utility is the Principle. So, as you've heard so many times, we had a makeshift temple, open-air temple, with a roof and the sides were open. And the devotees lived in one vacant tenant building, but it was so crowded. The woman's tenant building was so crowded, the apartment, that I went to the roof, which was flat, open-air roof, and I really enjoyed it under the palm trees. I set up my mosquito net and put down my mat, and I would have a bucket of water to bathe in the morning. It was quite sufficient for me. And although it was, you could say, primitive, Prabhupada had a flat here, and he did all his service from this flat, as he did everywhere. He got up very early in the morning to translate. Every morning, as Dinabandhu Prabhu was saying, he went on his walk at Juhu Beach, just a few minutes from here, from 6 to 7. He came back to this temple, which was so small and primitive, and gave this beautiful Bhagavatam class, greeted the deities. And it was here in Juhu where we started Guru Puja. The first Guru Puja was here. Before that, we never had this Guru Puja that we sing every morning, Sri Guru Janapadma. That was begun here. It's very historic, and from here it went throughout the world. So I can tell some personal stories from these times. One which I feel, because everyone has told these stories that give hope to us, so this story gives hope, I think, certainly to me, and I hope to all of us. I was a photographer. I'm a photographer. I was trained in college in photography. So every morning without fail, I would go on this morning walk to Juhu Beach because it was such a wonderful time. The light was perfect. Prabhupada was very animated, talking to the famous or infamous Dr. Patel. It was a long walk. For somebody who was in his 70s, this was exercise. I mean, this was the example for all of us, daily exercise. He took a long walk, he walked quickly, and would have these animated discussions as he went. So one morning, I was with my camera. It was still dark out. It was a little before 6, I think. And I was sitting chanting japa, waiting for Srila Prabhupada. Very simple scene. And Prabhupada came so quietly that I didn't hear him at all. And he passed by me just 6 inches from me. And as he passed by, he said to me, "Thank you very much." And I thought, what is he thanking me for? I'm just sitting here in the dark, But then I realized, no, I'm chanting japa. And Prabhupada appreciated that. His instruction, his first positive instruction after the 4 don'ts, was to chant Hare Krishna daily. And the fact that I was trying to do that, he appreciated and recognized. So I would say to all of us, when we chant Hare Krishna, Prabhupada is aware of that and appreciating that. And we should feel his appreciation and try to chant with all attention and humility as a service to the name, the holy name of Krishna. So that was wonderful. And then in the afternoons, regularly Prabhupada would go to the rooftop, the flat rooftop of this tenant building, and we put up a little dais there. And guests would come, sometimes residents from Hare Krishna land would come, sometimes people from the Juhu neighborhood would come, devotees would come. And again, I would photograph. There are many photographs of him in that very relaxed place with the palm trees behind him. Sometimes he's laughing. Many, many photographs because he was there so often. So once I went up a little bit early, and it was just Prabhupada and me. There was no one else had come yet. And I was sitting on the floor next to his dais with my camera. And he looked at me and he said, "Where should I look?" And you see, all of you got it. I didn't get it. I didn't know what he was talking about because I photographed him then for 3 years already, and he'd never said that to me before, and he never would again either. So it took me a few seconds to understand he's asking where he should look so I could take the picture. So then I had to think, well, what's the answer? So there's a few more seconds. I don't know how long, it's like my mind was racing. So then I finally said, "Wherever you like, Srila Prabhupada." So he turned a little to his right, and so there's a picture, which is Prabhupada posing for the camera, you could say.
And many people's favorite picture, right?
Yeah, some devotees really like that picture. So there are many wonderful times in that way, and also some very trying times. The devotees in our our inconceivable immaturity, did some inconceivably immature things. For example, in the center of this tenement structure, the 6 or 8 tenement structures, there was a little garden, and in that little garden there was a little statue of Mahatma Gandhi, maybe something like that. And somehow or other, Prabhupada had different statements about Mahatma Gandhi. So somehow or other, one morning, people woke up and that statue of Mahatma Gandhi had been cut off at the ankles and was gone. Right? So there was an uproar amongst the residents of our Hare Krishna land, So it was completely unnecessary, completely uncalled for. And so we had to try to make peace. So things like that went on in our, for inconceivable immaturity.
Can you tell the finger story? Fingers.
No?
The hole in the...
Okay, you sure?
Such a good story. Such a good story.
So this story is from Calcutta.
Oh, I thought it was my website.
No, it's from Calcutta. Request by my god sister. So in his rooms, Prabhupada traditionally had very thin mats, and the mats would be covered with white sheets. And those sheets would be changed, so it would be clean every day. So one day I was in Prabhupada's room in Calcutta, and there was a tear in one of the sheets, just maybe 2 inches. And Prabhupada indicated that tear, and he said to me, that should be sewn up, otherwise someone will catch their finger in it. So I was a bit confused, because ordinarily you'd think they'd catch their toe in it. So I went to Prabhupada's servant, who was Shrutakirti at that time, and I told him what Prabhupada had said, we need to sew up the tear in the sheet. And he said we were going to catch our finger in it. And how, why did he say finger? Well, shouldn't it be toe? So Shrutakirti Prabhu said that Prabhupada knows English better than we do. And that actually toes and fingers can be used interchangeably. And so it was perfectly correct for Prabhupada to say that we may catch our finger in it. So perhaps we should leave some time for discussion. I don't want to. What is the time?
22.
Yeah. So we have some time. If there's some discussion, some points you would like to bring up for us at this time. Comments?
While you're thinking, I can tell another story that you just reminded. Okay, so while you're thinking of questions or comments or thoughts to bring up, Vishaka, Prabhu just reminded me of another story. So I'm left-handed, which is very unusual in India. But someone told me today, Amrita Bhashan, is that how you say it? He's left-handed too. So anyway, so this story was in New York when the temple was at 26 2nd Avenue, and Prabhupada had an apartment upstairs in the back on the, what we would say, Indian first floor. Prabhupada had a little apartment there, so he would speak to the devotees in the evening. And so I was sitting writing notes on what he was saying and listening to him. And so at a certain point, Prabhupada stopped speaking, and he was just watching me write with my left hand. And he was really amazed that someone could do that. And then, and he said, yes, once in India, I saw a man who was playing tambura with his toes, kartals with his knees. He was going on and on, that this great feat that you could write with your left hand, the toes and fingers. You have questions? I have another really good story that I have written down here that I think is really important. Is that all right? Okay, so I was recently at the Govardhan retreat, and this was a big highlight of the retreat for me. Madhavananda Prabhu was quoting from, he had heard Prabhupada speaking in a lecture. Prabhupada was giving Nectar of Devotion classes in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple in 1972. And this was a really important instruction he gave there. So Prabhupada says, this Shraddha has to be increased. Then when you come to the point of Vasudev Ruchi, that is the beginning of our perfection. At the present moment, there is no Ruchi, no taste. There are so many exalted persons, but they have no taste. They have lost all taste. The preachers could not preach properly to create taste in the people in general. It is not the fault of the people. It is the fault of the so-called preachers. Because they could not create taste, they wanted to take the place of Krishna. That was their purpose. Imitation of Krishna. Imitation is not good. That will not do. You have to create taste, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. Important instruction for the preachers. Any of you have thoughts? Maharaj?
One time in Berkeley, California, Srila Prabhupada met with some Indian students. And, you know, the word guru is sometimes translated as meaning heavy. So Srila Prabhupada spoke to these young men, I believe it was all men, and he was a bit heavy. He was speaking quite straightforwardly. He said, so you have all come here as students, and you are studying, you are learning technology. You have come to learn technology. Yes? And they, yes. Then Prabhupada said, so that means you are beggar. And then he said, but I am not a beggar. I am a giver. I mention this because Srila Prabhupada had a very comprehensive vision of spreading Krishna consciousness. He went to the West after he saw that his initial efforts to preach in India were not really getting much response. His spiritual master gave him the instruction to preach in English. So technically he didn't say, go to the West. He just said, preach in English. So he was preaching in English in India and not getting so much response. So that's when he decided, okay, let me go to the West, let me go to America, because everyone looks to America. So if people in America will take up this Krishna consciousness, then people in India will look and think, oh, gosh, that's our culture. We should be doing that. And so Prabhupada did exactly this. He went to America, he went to New York, and we all know the story. And then after he had a few followers, he brought these followers where? To India. And here in India, as we heard, he had these pandal programs, and the Western devotees became the famous dancing white elephants. Prabhupada would joke about this, right? If you have a white elephant, it will be very attractive. If you have a dancing white elephant, that will be very impressive. So the dancing white elephants, and we know Srila Prabhupada became quite the sensation in India, especially in Delhi and Bombay and Calcutta. Also, he went to then Madras and so many other places. But here's the point I want to make, is that Prabhupada's vision was to inspire people of India to take up Krishna consciousness seriously, and excuse me, and then to follow in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps to spread Krishna consciousness around the world. In other words, for people of India not to be, complacent that, okay, here we are in India and we can chant Hare Krishna and worship Radha Ras Bihari and all is well, but to think, what could I do? How could I, first of all, become myself qualified as Krishna Bhakta, as Vaishnava, such that I could speak this message in a way such as Srila Prabhupada was speaking, to then inspire people in different parts of the world. So I think this is something to think about. Maybe we have obligations wherever we live here in, I still have to say Bombay, but yes, and related to this is, again, going back to Satsvarup Das Goswami's book, which originally was in 6 volumes, and the first volume of the 6 volumes had the title, A Lifetime in Preparation, and it tells the whole story of Srila Prabhupada's life up until 1965, when Srila Prabhupada was, how old? 69 years old. At that time, then he goes west, and the remaining 5 volumes of the story of Srila Prabhupada are telling about the 12 remaining years of Srila Prabhupada's manifest pastimes. So I think all of us can be thinking, okay, I'm such and such years old, how can I be preparing myself not to retire, but to take up the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada and his forebears, and what can I do to help to spread this wonderful mission? Hare Krishna.
I'll tell another story that's one of my favorites that you won't find in any memory tape, because I don't know where that devotee was. When I joined LA Temple, there was a devotee named Mahapurush. Remember Mahapurush? Sort of a mulatto type of fellow. Anyway, when I joined in Boulder, but it was snowing there, so it was freezing cold, so they sent me to LA to get trained up, because Prabhupada wanted his LA Temple to be the training center for the movement, at least America anyway. So when I got there was a very nice devotee who was from the 26 Second Avenue Temple named Mahapurush. And he told me an amazing story that shows inconceivable humility of Srila Prabhupada. because he knew that he used to come for the kirtan sometimes, and everybody knew that on the behind the 26th Dec Avenue, Prabhupada had his apartment, and if you came there around noontime, you got free food. But not just ordinary food, you got these funny little round breads called chapatis, and a spicy soup called dal, and some vegetables called sabji. So he used to go there sometimes, because, those days were the hippie days, so people didn't have money, so free food, all right, let's go. So he went there every once in a while. So one day he went there, and Prabhupada would sit there with all these hippies, and he would, direct the boys, he'd give him more, give him more, give him more. And it was so nice sitting there with Srila Prabhupada that he just didn't move. Everyone sort of got up. They walked out the door, threw their plate in the sink. What to speak of washing the plate, they didn't even wash their hands. Just threw the plate in the sink. This is the type of people we were, and walked out the door. But it was so nice sitting there with Swamiji. He just sat there, And suddenly he realized that he was all alone. He was there with Prabhupada and nobody else was in the room. And he looked around, he saw all these pots that all the sabji and everything had been in. There's all these dirty plates in the sink. And he said, somehow these pots get cleaned so somebody can cook with them every day. Somehow these dishes get washed so we can use them. I'm not usually here. There's only one person in this room that could be doing that. He thought, gee, maybe I should help him. And he stood up and started taking the plates, to the sink. And Prabhupada smiled and he said, I was just praying to Krishna to send someone to please kindly help me. These are the type of people that nowadays and in our temples in America, they came to the Sunday feast, we give them a plate, can you go around back? We don't want our life members to see this guy, Goes, can you send him around back? Give him a plate and send him around back, And Prabhupada was cooking for them and cleaning up for them. This is the humility. Nobody has lived the verse of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chanadapi Sunechena, Tororiva Sahishna, Manina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari, like Srila Prabhupada. He didn't have to do that. He could have stayed in India, he could have stayed in any Gaudiya, what to speak of cooking. They would be cooking for him, they would be doing his laundry for him, they'd be doing everything for him. But he came, and for these completely degraded people, no manners whatsoever, you don't want to know what we were like before we became devotees. And Prabhupada was cooking and cleaning for this type of people. Nobody has lived Mahaprabhu's verse like Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki! Yeah.
He was such a nice, very simple, just a very sincere, simple, kind person. And he was serving Prabhupada as his servant at that time. And his mother was dying, and he was talking to his mother about Krishna. And his mother asked him, while she was sort of in the stages of dying, she said to him, is your Krishna here right now? And he said, yes, Krishna's here right now. And, sometime after that, I don't know if it was right at that moment, but his mother died. And so he was telling Srila Prabhupada the story, and Prabhupada told him that your mother has gone back to Vaikuntha. Because he said, she has inquired about Krishna at the time of death. So she has gone to Vaikuntha. So beautiful. Yeah.
So for some time here in Bombay, Prabhupada stayed at the home of Kartikeya Mahadevya.
One memory connects to another. That's beautiful.
So Kartikeya Mahadevya was very favorable and very enthusiastic about Krishna consciousness, as was his whole family. They worshipped deities in their home, and they gave Prabhupada full facility of their home. And Prabhupada would speak there. He would lecture in the evenings, and all the devotees would come and gather in the living room in Kartikeya Mahadevya's home. So one evening, Prabhupada was speaking very strongly, unusually strongly, about India. And he said that India has become so fallen that they must import powdered milk and Brahmins. India has become so fallen that they must import powdered milk and Brahmins. So he was seeing with such disappointment that his own preaching before he came to America was not well received. People would not come forward to take up the mission. He had to go to the West and take these very unqualified people and try to train them in Krishna consciousness. And he was bringing them back to India. He was giving them second initiation and hoping that they would somehow touch the hearts of the Indian people and wake them up to the treasure that they were no longer paying attention to. So I was thinking in that regard that sometimes father and son, they do this import-export business. So Prabhupada brought these Westerners, made them into Brahmins, gave them initiation, and they came to India, right? And then they introduced Krishna consciousness to so many Indians, and sometimes those Indians go to the West. Those Indian Brahmins, now they go to the West, and they introduce the Westerners again to Krishna consciousness. So in this way, there's a great exchange. There can be a great exchange of this culture as the Westerners come here with Prabhupada's message and give it effectively to the people of India. And the people of India perhaps go to the West or anywhere in the world and try to impart that same message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and touch people's hearts and extract them from the material engagements that they're so absorbed in. So it's a great mission, and all of us can try to take Prabhupada's words to heart and take the pure message, not to adulterate it in any way, because that, of course, makes it less and less and less effective. I was speaking to Rukmini Prabhu earlier that the first 4 years of ISKCON, from founding of ISKCON in 1966 to 1970, the first 4 years, Prabhupada gave us knowledge, he taught us the culture, he taught us the etiquette, he was our example of what is a Krishna conscious person. We had only one example, and that was him. Then in 1970, as we know, he brought this first group of devotees that he had made to India. And at that time, you could try to visualize that Prabhupada had started this little river of Krishna consciousness through his disciples. And at that time, when these disciples come to India, you have the river, this very large river of Indian culture. And the two rivers, to some extent, they merged, right? And to some extent, what Prabhupada taught merged with the Indian culture, and the two sometimes are indistinguishable. So there's some examples of that. And these things perhaps should be separated so we can see, oh, Prabhupada gave this, but this is the Indian culture. Let's distinguish one from the other. That would be a whole study. We could interview those devotees that were here in those first 4 years to see Prabhupada's original training, and then how that was adjusted in different ways, for better or worse, once the Indian culture joined the ISKCON culture that Prabhupada has established. So just some reflections on that. Sometimes we hear classes from Indian disciples, Indian followers, and we hear things that are not in Prabhupada's books, and we wonder, well, is this from some folklore in India, or is from another bona fide scripture? They're not giving sources, and we're not quite sure where it's coming from. So it's good to stick very closely, very tightly to what Prabhupada has given. Otherwise, things can become confused and diluted, which certainly would not be good for Krishna consciousness, would not be good for our own spiritual lives.
It's 9 o'clock now. Supposed to go to now.
I'll tell one story about Prabhupada. because I believe it must have been 1971. There was a big Pandal program in Delhi in November. And after that Pandal program, Prabhupada brought all the devotees to Vrindavan, probably for one of the very first times, but he brought all the devotees there to Vrindavan. And then he took them on Prikrama to the different places. So it was the end of November by this time. It was quite cold. I just came from Vrindavan. It's the end of November now. It's beginning quite cold. So one of the places they went was Gokul, to a place called Brahmandagat. And it's right on the Jamuna. Jamuna is flowing by very nicely. Big steps are down. There's a big wall. There's a big embankment that comes out like this, round with a kadamba tree. And Prabhupada went down to the Jamuna. He touched the water. He said, "It is too cold for old man like me. But you all go in." He looked at all the devotees. "You all go in." All the devotees immediately just jumped in the Jamuna. We're having a good time splashing and playing around. And maybe you've seen in your Ever Well Wish Your video, suddenly Prabhupada, he shakes his head, he pulls off his sweater, he's into his gamsha. He went into the water. First he said, "It's too cold for old man like me." But he saw the young devotees having so much fun. Prabhupada went in the water, then Indian style, he grabbed his nose and ping, ping, ping 3 times. And maybe you've seen that scene. That happened at Brahmandagat in Vrindavan. Hare Krishna. So it's 9 o'clock now, I think. Yes, Visakha Devi's books are available if you want to get them. I'm sure she'll also sign them. Huh? How much? Only 400 rupees. How many pages of nectar? Almost 300 pages of nectar for only 400 rupees. Hare Krishna.
So let's thank His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami, Deenbandhu Prabhu, Vishakha Mataji and Rukmini Mataji for enlightening us on Srila Prabhupada, and not just the stories but also so many instructions for us on how we can improve our own Krishna consciousness. Let's thank them by once very loudly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. So Mataji has written this very nice book, 5 years and 11 months with Srila Prabhupada. Whoever wishes to purchase a copy can come in a line and Mataji will sign it for you. Hare Krishna.